Hey guys, welcome to another video. How you all doing? Back here in my home office now. Happy place to be. Now, as the very avid keen editors among you will have noticed, Avid has dropped a fancy new version of Media Composer this week. Just a day or two ago, actually, as time of recording. And so I wanted to make a quick video of running through the main new features, testing them out in a live uncontrolled environment. They've added a lot of really cool new stuff. With a lot of my feature requests to Avid, it's generally the little things that make a big difference to me, and I feel like the little things have got a lot of attention this time around, so thank you very much, Avid. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to doing more projects using this new version, which I'll definitely get torn into. So without further ado, let's take a look. Right, now before we get started, I just want to say that it's very imperative that you build a new user setting, rebuild your user settings for this new version of Avid MC. Even if you're just coming from the most recent Avid version, 2022.7. I mean, I had just rebuilt my user settings about a week ago, updated to 2022.10, and I was having all kinds of issues with mundane things like adding video tracks to a sequence. So definitely create new user settings. Now, at the end of the video, if you want to stick around that long, I will demonstrate how to quickly rebuild your settings without having to remap all your keys. I've shown it in another video before, but for the purposes of this, where it's most useful, I'll highlight that again. But let's jump into new feature number one. Right, so we now have a new feature when creating a new project, which I'll demonstrate here. If I've got a new project in settings, choose for me. Now if I set choose for me, this is essentially the same as what you get on NLEs like DaVinci Resolve and Final Cut 10. I'm not sure about Premiere, but there's a good chance it'll have something like this too. Whereby when you in the first media that you ingest and you put on a timeline, it'll auto set the project properties to match that media. So this could be very useful if you're a beginner, and particularly if all the media you're going to use in your project will always be the same resolution and frame rate, then you're fine. Now, the thing to be aware of when doing this is situations where you may have varying frame rates within the one project. And in these cases, the frame rate that you want to set for your project is the one that you want to deliver in. And this also goes for resolution as well, although not necessarily if you're working in offline. So just bear that in mind. So I'm going to, just to demonstrate it, I'm going to hit choose for me, create. We'll start a new project here. And we've got a new project. Now you can see another new thing here. I didn't give this project a name, so it's just called Untitled. But Avid has, by default, instead of just one bin that's Untitled bin, or the name of the project bin, Avid by default now gives us two bins, and by default gives them bin background colors as well to make them look different. So we'll have one for clips and one for sequences. So this opening feature here is definitely probably for newcomers to help you ease into Media Composer and help you get started. And I'll now demonstrate how it will auto set the properties by bringing in some clips. Okay, so I've just linked in quickly a whole bunch of clips here. Got them here. And I'm going to throw them onto this sequence that has already been made as part of this sequences bin from Avid. And as soon as I put these on the timeline, this window pops up. It says, before continuing, the project must establish a raster, size of the image, and edit rate, frames per second. Based on the clip you are adding to the timeline, Media Composer will set the project to 1080p 23976. So there you go, Media Composer can auto set your project properties for you. Very useful feature. As I can see this being particularly handy in offline environments on a show or a production where it's always going to be one frame rate. And scripted content, stuff like that, your films are always going to be 2398, 24, probably 24. Your TV content in PAL regions will always be 25, for example. So, yeah, nice little handy. So if I do cancel here, what does it show me in the Format tab? So by default it's put 1080p 30. Right, so if I go to put that on the timeline again, I'll just grab it, one of the clips there. So. Then I'll OK the message this time. Right, so let's put that on the timeline. And now if we look at the Format tab, it's all been reset to match the media that I've brought in. There we go, nice and easy. Right, now while we're in this temp project that I've set up here, this little untitled, I can demonstrate another feature that's been added. So generally when you're in frame view, the advantage that you get is that you get this lovely thumbnail, but the disadvantage is that you lose all this lovely information that you can get in text data, in text view, sorry. And script view has tried to be the best of both worlds, but you know it's a bit of a hit and a miss for me, although I know plenty of people love it. But we now have the option that if we're in frame view, if you hover over a clip, it will bring up the format of the clip, the duration, the date created, just a highlight of some of the most important metadata for that particular clip. So if you're just quickly looking to see the duration of something, or you want to double check the raster size, there you go. You now have that option. Right, now this next one is a biggie, and one that I'm surprised hasn't been added sooner, but I very much welcome it, is a massive update to Relink when we're talking about linked clips, so your AMA linked clips. So historically, whenever you'd relink, you would be brought up with this window. This is your traditional relink window for Avid, which I have a very good relationship with, and I can usually relink anything without too much bother. But if you are linking to media and it goes offline, but you know exactly where the clip is on your drives, you should be able to just point to it, right? And historically, the way to fix this in Avid would be to just link it in again in a separate bin, and Avid would restore the connection. But now, what we can do, I've just brought all of these offline. I will add the offline bin columns so that you can see. There you go. So all of this is offline. Now, if I go, I'll just select them all, do them all. I'll do right click, relink. We now have two options here. So there's managed media, that's our traditional relink window, and linked media. So if I hit linked media here, we have this new window. So if we had selected the whole bin, we could filter it to show only the offline media, or we could show all media and relink it to a new version of the clip elsewhere. But it wouldn't matter in this case because I've brought them all offline. So I'm going to select all these and do locate media. And now I can just navigate to where I know the files are. It's actually already done it. But I'd be able to go to volumes, projects, my edit stock stuff, and get all the way to the media folder, and then just select the containing folder and hit choose. And that should do it. And now that we've pointed to it, Avid should just relink everything, and it has linked media 60. So if I go back to my bin, error, nothing is registered as offline. It is all back online and available to us. So there we go. Much more logical way to relink your linked clips just by directly pointing to where they are. Now we can do some experimenting with this down the line about directly linking to new versions, particularly for animation and visual effects. I could see this being very useful to just point to the new ones. But stay tuned for that. We'll see. But that's the new feature. Thank you, Avid. Right, now this next one's an interesting one. I'm going to bring my timeline over here to show you. I have it in my other monitor usually. So if we right click anywhere in the background of the timeline, we have this option up here in the timeline context menu called Create Sequence Template. Now I'll call this, say, I don't know, editing. Nothing's coming to mind right now. Now here in this menu, we can actually create sequence templates. We can create a template of the track layout, the names of the tracks, whether they're mono or stereo audio tracks. This is incredibly useful because you could have multiple set up for different stages of the edit or how you like to work. So I'm going to create one here of what I like to use when I'm bash editing. So I'm just going to delete everything to start with. I've just minus them all out. And I'm going to add in the tracks starting bottom to top. You could reorganize this after you've done it, but I just want to add them in the order that they'll be. I'll show you how you could reorganize it afterwards as well. So I generally like about 10 audio tracks. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then I like a data track in between, just as a separator. And then about 3 video tracks. 2, 3. It seems intent I'm putting that data track up there, but that's fine. So my audio tracks that I have here, I'm going to put the bottom 2 as stereo because I like them as music. So I will call that music. And then I want about my first 4 audio tracks to be dialogue. And then the remainder will be sound effects. Now this is more for assembling and doing short films and things like this. But, you know, if I needed more, I could build another sequence template. And you can see as I click the little speaker icon here, I can change the setup of the audio channel of that track. So I can change it from mono, like this, to stereo, to a 5.1 track, to a 7.1 track, back to mono. So I'm going to have 4 mono dialogue tracks, 2 mono sound effects tracks, 2 stereo sound effects tracks, and 2 stereo music tracks. Now this isn't necessarily exactly what I'd like to use every time, but it's not a bad place to start, and it, you know, shows what we're doing. Now if you had made your whole template and you'd realized you'd got the order wrong or something wasn't quite right, you can select the type of track anywhere here and change and reorder stuff. So you can set this one, say you actually want more video tracks, so you can change one of your audio ones to a video track. Can you Command Z this? You can't, but you can undo it manually. Also just be aware it does not look like you can at this time simply grab one and reorder it. So there we go, I have my sequence template here. I can set the default starting timecode. I'm going to set this as 0:59:50. Oh, I generally like a 10-second leader and I like stuff to start at 0:1. And I'll hit save and I'll save that as a sequence template called editing. That's saved. So now if I go to my sequences bin here and I create a new sequence, that is what has come up. You can see it's created my new sequence with that template layout. Hooray! Now before we move away from this, let's see what happens if I have more than one template. So if I say one called assembling, right? Where I'll create assembling, I don't need that track, and I don't need 3 video tracks, and I'll just do that. So let's see. No, I have to. So if I go to create a sequence now that there's more than one template, let's see what it does. It defaults to the editing one by the looks of it. Oh no, it defaults to the newer one that I've set. Right, so the answer was, after looking a bit around, that if you just do Shift-Command-N to create a new sequence, it seems to default to the last sequence template you created, the most recent one. But if you do a right click new sequence, you can see your sequence templates there and you can choose from them. So the default Avid template is still there, as well as the two new ones that I have made. So there we go. That's how you can access your sequence templates when you're initially creating a sequence. Very useful, especially I really like the naming the tracks by default and having that in your template setup. That's very nice. Cheers, Avid. Appreciate that one. Right, now, next awesome new feature is that we have a few new keyboard shortcuts. So I'm going to just grab a few new windows in here. Just so we've got this monitor a bit more busy. And so the first one we have is Command up and down. So what this is doing, if you can see, is it's toggling the selection of all these different windows. So there I'm going between timeline and composer. I can go between composer and bins. This is just me holding the command key and going up and down. This is going to be incredibly useful for people who do scripting and macros, because we can now jump back to the most active bin by selecting the bin container from the timeline, as well as a whole host of other things. We can tab to any active panel that's available in the workspace. I've actually requested this feature and I know other people have, so further proof that Avid does listen. Thank you. Right, but that's not the only new keyboard shortcut. We also have another one that allows us to tab between tabbed bins. So if we have a window where we have anything tabbed here, selected, we can control tab between all the tabs in that window. So this is for tabbing between bins. And the keyboard shortcut is actually the same whether you're on Mac or Windows. So that's a plus as well, especially for us editors that regularly go between both. So control tab to cycle between your bins. Nice. Right, now this next new feature is one that I know people have asked for many times actually, and that is the ability to group your audio tracks together and gang those groups, and have separate gangs per group. So let me demonstrate. Here I have a sequence from a short film and there's 10 audio tracks. Now I have them named, so A1 to 3 is dialogue, 4 to 8 are sound effects, and 9 and 10 are music. So we can see them all named and labelled up here as well. So I'm going to select my dialogue once, and then if I right click under this area here called groups, I can say new group from selected tracks. And I'll call this group dialogue. Okay, cool. I'll delete that default one. Now I'll create another group for my sound effects. Cool. And I'll create one more for my music. Now we can color code these groups as well. And now if you do a lot of color coding with your clips, so for example on this timeline all of my music is colored gold. I can bring it over to demonstrate with you. So you can see there my music's colored gold, my sound effects are blue, and my dialogue is as a mixture. This is an old project I'm looking at, so there's offline media, but you know, it works for the purposes of what I'm trying to demonstrate here. So we will mimic those colors with our groups to make things easier. So for my music here, I'll just right click the color, same way as you would coloring a clip in the bin, and I'll make that gold, blue, and my dialogue can stay that color. It's a different color. So now we have three separate groups that we can toggle on and on. We can toggle the enabling the tracks by just selecting the group. If you have the audio mixer available, this is going to be really useful if you're doing an audio pass and you have a workspace that has the audio mixer quite large, now that we have a fully resizable audio mixer. But I did say as well that you can gang these together, and I'll show you how. So we are allowed 10 groups of ganging in order to gang. And when we right click here, we can see we get this ganging menu where we can move and add groups to different gangs. So we have gangs A through to J. So you get 10 gangs that you can use, a maximum of 10 gangs. Now for me, I only need 3 here, so that's going to be plenty. So I'm going to put my dialogue in gang A. I'm going to put my music in B, and my sound effects in C. Now this might seem like a bit of setup, but it's going to be, it could save you a lot of time down the road. So you can now see in the gang icon above all these clips that we have them color coded based on the group that they're in. So for example, go to part of the timeline with 2 music tracks, and I can pull those down and up together. Go to a part with a bunch of sound effects. So I have several sound effects here under the one gang group. I can move these up and down together. And I don't really have any overlapping. Oh no, there we go. Here. So I can move my dialogue up and down together as well. So you might not want this on all the time, but this could be extremely useful if you're doing a sound pass, if you just want to balance the levels between your music, sound effects and dialogue, or if you get right into doing sound work and you want to create a whole bunch of different groups. You know, I can see you having several different ganging groups within your sound effects, maybe for a background layer or your more forefront effects and stuff like that. So really useful feature, great thing to have, and it's great to see more sort of stuff like this from DAWs and like Pro Tools being brought over into Avid. It's much appreciated, so thank you very much. Right, now for this next one I'm going to drag my timeline back over here again. Now, many of you will be familiar with this little menu here. So this is where we can choose where our Avid output goes. So our Avid output, in my instance here, is going to a Blackmagic Ultra Studio monitor. That's where I send it to my client monitor at home. But what if you're working remotely, say you're doing a session where you want to send your output through NDI, but you also have one of the clients, like the director, in the room with you, but you also want to have a screening for a producer. With the latest version of Avid, you can now enable both. So you can have your client monitor active as well as sending out via NDI. So you can see they're now both ticked. So one doesn't override the other. You can send your Avid output in multiple directions. And if you're on Avid Ultimate, SRT will also be an option here as well. That's not subtitles, that's secure, reliable transport. Another more secure method of sending your Avid out over the internet for remote working. But as with all things that are really empowering in NLEs, it gives you more options. So especially in a world where we're moving more and more towards lots of remote working, this is very much appreciated, and it's going to help a number of editors, I imagine, have those sort of screenings without enabling, you know, specialist hardware and software like Evercast, for example. Right, now that wraps up our new headline major feature additions to Media Composer in 2022.10. Now, as on top of everything listed, there are a whole suite of bug fixes, ranging from stuff to do with the list tool. A whole number of these involve Title A+, as you are no doubt unsurprised. But you can see here with the amount of bugs listed that have been fixed, the Avid engineers have clearly been hard at work. So we're getting all of these bug fixes as well as all of the additional great features that we have already covered. But at the start of the video, I did say that I would show you how to quickly rebuild user settings. So let's quickly show that before we wrap up. So if you're in Media Composer, if you're in a recent version of Media Composer, then when you bring up the settings menu, under user profile, you have the option to reveal user profile, and I'll show you exactly where it is. Now, both on Mac and Windows, these tend to be in a shared folder environment. So, for example, on my home system here, this is in shared, this is in users, shared, Avid Media Composer, Avid users, and then this is the user of my computer, Jack Brown, and then here are the different user profile settings that I've made for Avid. Now, JB 2022.10 is the new one that I've just made. The Avid Assistant was my old user profile. Now, inside each one of these, there is an XML file, and this contains all of the specific user settings that you've created. It contains all of the settings that are here under user in your settings window. And you can actually open these inside of Avid. You can open the settings of another user. So if you've exported your settings somewhere, or if you just want to navigate to that shared folder and open your own settings, we can do that just now. So I'm just going to tidy this up a little bit. And now if you do Command O, or just go File, Open Settings File, it'll bring up an OS Finder level window where we can go and find those settings. So I'm going to go Macintosh HD, Users, Shared, Avid Users, and then my old settings here, the Avid Assistant. I can go into there, select the XML file and hit Open, and then you'll see this window will pop up. Oi. And you'll see this window will pop up with all of the user settings of my old user profile. And you can simply drag and drop these user settings into your new one. So I've already done this for my keyboard. It's called Edit here. So if I go to Keyboard here, I had my Edit keyboard, I just dragged and dropped it over. But there are some settings I haven't brought over yet, like my bin views. So, see, syncing. I'm going to grab a few of these and just drag and drop them over into my new user profile settings, and boom, there they are, they appear. So I would recommend doing this for stuff like bin views, keyboards, maybe even export settings, which you can drag back and forth between. If you have a lot of custom ones, if not, you know, might as well just rebuild them. But stuff like your interface presets and things like this, I personally would just rebuild. It shouldn't take too long to go through and set these windows again. The keyboard is the log one, and this should save you some time in rebuilding your user settings, which you must do for this new version. And that is your shortcut to updating your user settings. Right guys, so that was Avid Media Composer 2022.10. Thank you very much for watching. Lots to be excited about. If you are an Avid editor or an Avid assistant, there's plenty more Avid related content on the channel, as well as a number of Avid related content over on my Patreon page, where I dive into, you know, my own workflows, how I use it on my projects, and the odd tips and tricks and things like that. So if you're interested, you can head over there and take a look. But as for this video, we have now come to an end. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all next time.